Do you agree that saying no is often like one of the best things a marketing ops team can do and how you go about this in a constructive way?
There's a shift that's happening. How can you position your marketing ops team as a strategic lever versus like the service model historically that we've seen? Then it's easier to kind of push back and say no because you have more context behind why things are happening. We can't do everything, but we can do some things. And so we're going to work with you and figure out the best way forward. You have to pick your battles as well. How many hours am I going to actually end up putting into this?
Hmm.
When it could just be a simple, okay, we'll do it and we'll show you the results after. I always say there's no real emergency in marketing. It's just an email, or it's just a marketing campaign. It's going to be okay.
What's up, everyone? Today we have the pleasure of chatting with Leary, Director of Marketing Operations at Alma. In this episode, we cover rituals that protect mental health, like the power of saying no, quiet stress versus visible stress, and knowing your worth. We also explore bad situations, like hiring experts only to tell them what to do, and the emotional tax of always having to prove yourself. All that and a bunch more stuff after a quick word from two of our awesome partners. This episode is brought to you by MoEngage and their new Warehouse Native CEP, which revolutionizes the way data should be seamlessly fetched, analyzed, and activated. Now you can use MoEngage Cloud Data Sync to sync your warehouse data with MoEngage and use it to segment audiences or personalize messages without any development. Just set and forget. Use MoEngage warehouse segments to create segments on your warehouse data without moving underlying events, properties, or proprietary segmentation logic, and activate them directly on MoEngage. Using warehouse data analytics, brands can also directly generate insights from their warehouse data. Your long search solution for seamless data sync, smarter segmentation, dynamic personalization, and delightful customer experiences ends here. Warehouse Native CEP from MoEngage, making it easy, smart, and secure. Learn more at moengage.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Knack. I have the amazing pleasure of chatting with some of the greatest minds in marketing operations, but you'd be shocked at how many of them have the same issues when it comes to their campaign creation process. They're dealing with things like scaling, personalization, keeping assets on brand, render testing emails, working in rigid templates, and worst of all, having to hand code emails. But many of the leaders in the space are using Knack to eliminate these headaches. Knack is a no-code email and landing page creation platform that covers initial campaign requests right until the sync to your marketing automation platform. Knack improves the whole campaign creation process by bringing the building, optimization, testing, collaboration, and also translation functions all in a single spot. So you don't have to jump around and coordinate feedback between a bunch of different people or wait on developers for very simple edits. Because at the end of the day, marketing ops folks want to focus on process and efficiency. Marketers want to focus on creativity, and Knack makes sure you get both and then some. Check them out at knack.com. That's KNAK, and tell them we sent you. Anna, I've always wanted to do a mental health themed episode for Marketing Ops and Martech pros, and I can't think of a better guest than the Director of Marketing Ops at Alma, a mental health platform. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this during your crazy planning week. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here and kind of talk a little bit more about mental health and how it intertwines with marketing ops.
My first thought of like where do we take this conversation is kind of like the behind the scenes and the burnout of like the role itself. So marketing ops is obviously like high pressure behind the scenes gig. If you've been in this role, you know that there's like a ton of fire drills all the time, last minute campaign changes, data emergencies, Slack messages all the time. There's constant pressure to, do things and be responsive, and it can totally take a serious toll on your mental health if it's not managed properly.
Mhm.
So working at a mental health company like Alma, you're probably more aware than most of the importance and like the skills you need to, or the strategies, I guess, for taking care of your own mental wellness and also take care of the business. Do you think the marketing ops community talks enough about stress and burnout, and how do you personally manage your mental health without burning out yourself and your team members?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think marketing ops, naturally comes with like a heavy mental load in terms of like context switching all of the time and things like that. It's interesting because I've seen a few more people talk openly about burnout over the past few years, a little bit more on LinkedIn. I've seen that, but then it's also balancing with, this marketing ops world that we're in of everyone's always trying to be like the top person that knows like the tech or, is using the newest tool or is, up to date on like this API or that API. So sometimes it's hard to keep up, and that I think can add to some of that mental load as well, just in this community in general.
Yeah, so what do you think like companies should be doing better to support the well-being of ops bros who are kind of quietly carrying a lot of stress? Maybe that's not like visible as visible as some of the other teams. Like, where does your mind go?
Yeah, I feel like a good start would be following the processes and procedures that ops professionals have implemented at their companies. SLAs are a really good start to that. A lot of times I see, you know, someone's coming back with this, oh, this is urgent. So like I know we have the SLAs, but can we just make an exception this time? And it's like if we're making an exception for everything, then we're actually not respecting the process. And as most ops professionals are very process oriented as well. So I think that can add to that, mental strain, trying to balance, how to be a little bit more agile, but also follow process as well.
Yeah, I know we have SLAs, but it's just like
Yeah.
I'd have a lot of cash if I had $5 for every time someone started a Slack message with
Oh,
that.
yeah. And even lately, I've heard the term scrappy. We need to be scrappy with this. And I'm like, that makes me cringe.
So, like, why are we doing all this planning and, like,
Yeah.
all the work, like, thinking about, 'cause I don't know about you, but, like, in some companies, we went through this whole route of, like, "All right, let's try to be agile, the whole marketing team, let's run this through ops," and we get into a whole, like, sprint planning mode, and we
Mhm.
do all this work up front about prioritizing, deciding what we're gonna do, and but there's always that comes up, like, randomly and
Right.
displaces what you and so, like, I've always struggled with this balance of, like, how much time and energy do we spend on planning, knowing that, like, good chunks of that are just gonna go out the window, and we're gonna do something else because there's gonna be a fire here and a fire there, and someone's gonna say, "Well, I know there's SLAs, but, like, why are we spending all this time on planning?" Like, I'm an ops person at heart, and I know that the importance of planning, but I've been at some companies where it's just like, let's be agile, but also like agile to them means like not sprint planning and deciding what we're going to do in like small chunks. For them, it's just like have room, buffer room in your day to just do what I want you to do.
Yeah, it's hard to manage that balance of boxing yourself into these requests for a quarter, for example.
Yeah.
We historically on the MOPS team had done quarterly planning where we were doing capacity planning as well, because
Hmm.
we do have a lot of external resources. And this is the first quarter where I'm like, we're not doing that anymore because we have too many things that come up, and then things that come up at the beginning of the quarter and then they just kind of fall flat or they can't be done for XYZ reason. So let's just try to be a bit more agile in that, which is hard for me because I'm very like type A, but it's also like giving up some of that is actually good in the end because it's less stressful as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about like this idea of saying no. I think that, this for some people is seen as kind of like a privilege. Like if you're earlier in your company, you don't really have the opportunity as much to say no to stuff. Like you're at the bottom of the polar, so to speak, and you just like you get handed work and you just gonna have to do it. As you're kind of growing in your career and you've matured in certain aspect and you have, reps in like the industry, you understand certain things, like maybe you become a bit more comfortable like calling yourself like quote unquote an expert in certain areas. Like
Mhm.
marketing ops folks often feel like they still have to be yes people. It's seen as a service department for so many different companies and jumping on every request from sales or marketing or whatever
Mhm.
department. I think the best mops people that I've chatted with are known for being no people when it counts, at least. Like they're
Mhm.
not afraid to push back on projects that won't move the needle. Like they aren't like grumpy all the time and say no to everything just for the sake of saying no. Like there's good reasons and they explain it why, even when it means like telling higher ups, no, we're not doing this. Do you agree that saying no is often like one of the best things a marketing ops team can do? And maybe chat about like how you go about this in a constructive way. And
Yeah,
like how do you empower your team members to stick to their guns without, getting overruled?
for sure. I think this ties back really strongly with mental health. I know I've worked with a therapist for years, and boundaries are very important. So boundaries like in your personal life, boundaries in your professional life. I think where you can implement that with MOPS are boundaries around where you can say no. So I think it's important to also understand why you're saying no. And also, it doesn't always have to be no forever. It's just no for right now. So, maybe someone hasn't really thought through what they've requested from MOPS, for example. So you kind of have to push back and say, hey, I need this X, Y, and Z to be done before we can actually execute on this. So I'm going to say no for now, but please come back to us when you've actually handled those things. And then we can kind of talk a little bit more on like the strategy. One thing with MOPS, historically, I think MOPS has been viewed as a ticket taker, where we have our forms, we have our, Jira, Asana boards or whatever. And I think there's a shift that's happening too, and especially with MOPS, is how can you position your marketing ops team as a strategic lever for the business versus like the service model historically that we've seen. And I think as you naturally do that, then it's easier to kind of push back and say no because you have more of that, context behind why things are happening as well. I think it's also important to enable the team to say no too. So I actually just had a call today where one of my contractors was going through something, talking about how someone had requested something to be done in the email, and we don't have the capability to do that right now. And I said, hey, it's okay to tell them that we can't do this. We don't need to spend hours figuring out a way to make this work. We just say no, and they will be okay with that. And so just really making it okay for your team to actually push back as well, I think can also help people understand like, oh, there are boundaries with marketing ops. Like we can't do everything, but we can do some things. And so we're going to work with you and figure out the best way forward.
I often blame like the bandwidth that we have sometimes for being able to say no. So like instead of saying no and pushing back on something and being seen as like the grumpy ops person, I will show like our Notion board or our Asana board and like these are the things we're working on this sprint or that we've committed to. And you remember that meeting that we had last week to
Mhm.
chat about these? And I asked you like, is there anything else you want to put on our plate? And you said no. Like that's set in stone for now. Like we're not saying no for like the rest of the year, but for now this is our focus. You've committed to this. We signed off on this and if you're changing your mind about it now, like why are we even doing this in the first place?
Totally. Yeah. I think with that too, tying back to if your company has goals or KPIs, you can always kind of push back to with that. Like, how does this ladder up to
Yeah.
a goal? How will this help move the needle forward in what we're trying to accomplish as a company? I think that's also like a way that you can frame it too.
Yeah, definitely. So like saying no to new requests is one thing. Another element that we kind of chatted about before recording here is like pushing back on the way we do certain things. Like I know we share this irritation of companies hiring experts but then ignoring their advice or bulldozing them into bad decisions. Like
Hmm.
asking someone to do something new is one thing, but then like telling someone to do it and despite like their explanation about why we shouldn't do it. Like I've faced this countless times in my in-house career. I think it's just like it's part of the gig. Like there's always going to be people who think they know marketing better than marketing experts and it's just part of the gig, I feel like. And maybe you can share a story or like a battle from your past or your recent past where you were against doing something and how you kind of like navigated that.
Yeah, we've had a few of these. I mean, I've had a few of these over, my in-house career as well as like agency
Yeah.
career as well. Um, I think the most recent example is we had a no reply request for a Marketo email, and it just makes you like tingle hearing to send from a no reply because there are reasons why you don't do it. And we've been over this conversation multiple times with various stakeholders, and it was one of those instances where it was like, how hard can we do we just do it and just say we can do it one time, or do we just say no and, hold our foot down, so
Yeah.
it's hard to
Yeah.
like kind of balance that. It's also I think that most recent example was a really good, experience for me, like, with my manager. She was like, "We can only take this so far, like, how much mental bandwidth are we willing to put into this fight to
Hmm.
say no?" So that's also, like, a good consideration too of just, sometimes it's not worth the battle. You have to pick your battles as well in marketing ops, and it's like, is that really the one? I think, historically too, I've seen this at multiple companies where leadership thinks email is the way to do everything. So they're always, "Hey, we need to send this email. It's urgent." And it's like, is email really the best route for this? Like, I'm not sure if we should be sending an email for this, but of course, anything that comes from, the C-suite down, it's hard to kind of push back when they have this idea in their head. So you almost have to do it and then later on with data prove why it wasn't a good idea. So sometimes you do actually have to do the thing and then say, "Hey, see why I told you this wasn't a good idea?" So it's kind of like figuring out that balance of like what you're willing to battle.
Yeah, such a good point. It's easier said than done, like deciding what is like hills that you're willing to die on for certain things. Like,
Mhm.
there's so many like passion areas of niche topics in marketing ops that maybe you're gonna die on this one hill because you've done this project 17 other times in-house and external, and you just like how this is gonna go, and the person coming to you with this idea understands nothing about it. Like my
Mhm.
favorite example is for coworkers listening, like they're gonna know exactly where this is from. But so I was at a company where this came down like C level two. So like C level person wanted us to send out an email to people and like resend it to non-openers.
Mhm.
And this is just like a classic thing. Like it's just like one of those tactics in Neil Patel's playbook. Like you should do it. And like just read one article. He actually sent over an article from Neil Patel. He's like, "Look, Neil Patel, digital market expert, says we should do it." And it was just like so cringe having to explain why we don't do this, why it's not best practice. And there's like an education piece to like deciding what's the battle you're willing to die on because like saying no is one thing, but then explaining, educating, and then just like falling on deaf ears because ultimately they don't really care about deliverability and domain reputation, despite how many times you explain that it's gonna hurt everyone else's corporate domain rep. And yeah, like what comes to mind? Like if I ask you, like, what advice do you have for deciding if something is worth like being a hill you're gonna die on? Like, how do you make that call? Like, something comes through that no reply email. Like, what's that gut check of just like, all right, this is something I believe about. I'm gonna fight for this. Like, I don't want my team to deal with this crap in the
Mhm.
future. Versus, you know what? Like, let's just do it. It's gonna take us 2 minutes. Like, just get it out the door. There's 7 other things we can worry about tomorrow. Like, what's that gut check for you?
Yeah, I think it's, a few things. It's obviously there's like a component of the audience, like the person, the stakeholder that you're dealing with. And also, understanding like historically, like what road am I gonna have to take if I say no to this? Am I gonna have to Is it gonna be a back and forth conversation, I think? Like, how many hours am I going to actually end up putting into this
Hmm.
when it could just be a simple, "Okay, we'll do it, and we'll show you the results after." So I think it's like one of those, like, decision trees, deciding if the what is it called? This word, the squeeze, I'm not good with, like, sayings, but,
Yeah, yeah, it's something like that. I'm bad with those things too.
yeah.
Yeah, like hiring experts and then not trusting them. Like, yeah, it irritates me to no end. And I feel like the worst part of it is that it leads to like an emotional tax of like always having this feeling that you have to prove yourself. And I feel like this is a pretty common thing in marketing ops. Like, I don't know, I've always dealt with imposter syndrome, like it's a very technical role and then you're dealing with like IT and engineers and product engineers, and really quickly, like I felt out of my depths in certain conversations. But then you talk with marketers, and they think you're like a crazy like technical magician, and it's like a spectrum of technical ability,
Mhm.
right? I don't know if you felt this, but like something I've struggled with a lot in house is that like ops professionals are constantly asked to justify their choices or like back up best practices when they like already know that we shouldn't send an email from a no reply, or like we shouldn't send an email, the same email, to people that didn't open it the first time. Like that cycle, like you mentioned, of like the back and forth, like it can chip away at confidence and not
Mhm.
just like your energy. Like, how do you manage that emotional tax of always potentially having to prove yourself? And what mental habits do you think protect confidence while still advocating for what's right and what you think is dumb?
Yeah, I think there's an education piece. So a lot of the times, anytime I'm getting these questions, a good example of this was around sending an email like a few days before Christmas.
Hmm.
And I pushed back and was like, I don't think this is a good idea. Email rates, like engagement during this time is not very good. And I got pushed back. Well, can you show me data that says this? And it's just one of those things that as an ops professional, like you don't send an email the week of Christmas because engagement's going to be low. Like you just don't do that. And so I think there's like an education component, but also, sometimes, I mean, for me, I just have to kind of like let it kind of roll off my shoulder and laugh about it a little bit because you can't take it too seriously at the end of the
Hmm.
day. Sometimes I even, if I'm dealing with like a back and forth with someone, I'll take a break from my computer. I'll walk outside and just sit outside for like 5 minutes and try to get a refresher and then come back with like a fresh mindset to kind of figure out a better way to move forward with certain stakeholders. It's a really tough, it's hard to kind of balance that, you know, constantly trying to, prove yourself in this role and, um, show that you're the expert when you're it's almost like you're getting attacked with low impact questions,
Yeah.
essentially. So, it's figuring out, like, how do you educate people while also, like, remaining sane as well and not, like, losing your mind. So I think that's really important to kinda, like, set the scene too as your, like, marketing team grows and your marketing ops team of, you know, educating people on best practices around email or, why you should do something versus not do something with, interacting with customers, for example. So, yeah, it's this constant, balance of figuring out the best way to keep people educated while also, like, remaining sane from all the questions that you get as well.
I think that's great advice, like not taking things too seriously sometimes. Like, sometimes you get so passionate about a certain topic and you're down this like rabbit hole debate going back and forth with folks, and you lose sight of the fact that it's like it's been 2 hours that you're debating this one thing. You have a bunch of other stuff to do. Like, close the laptop, go for a walk outside, come back and just like, yeah, you know what? Email deliverability is not going to be the hill I'm dying on today. Like, if this person in IT thinks that we should send all emails from the corporate domain, like, all right, whatever.
Sure.
Like, I'll record it in the Slack conversation that this was against marketing ops advice. And if this is the hill he wants to die on or she wants to die on, like, whatever. Yeah, I feel like that's really good advice. Like, not taking it too seriously. I've never been at a company where like we were saving babies or like we were
Right.
doctors, like no one's gonna die if we don't send this email tomorrow. Like it's not that big of a deal, guys. Like let's just
Right.
relax a little bit.
Yes. I always say there's no real emergency in marketing, it's just marketing.
Hmm.
Even if it was, like, a technical, like, emergency where something was sent to, like, millions of people, like, at the end of the day, it's just an email, or it's just a marketing campaign. It's gonna be okay. So I know probably some, like, executive leaders will hear me say that and be like, "What?"
This episode is brought to you by Revenue Hero. Two field forms: complete context, instant scheduling. Finally, you get to pick all three without a single line of code. Introducing Native Enrichment by Revenue Hero. Plug in Clearbit, Crust Data, Apollo, or stack all three. Enrich all the data you need instantly on submit. Stack your enrichment providers, waterfall your way to clarity. Determine qualification and meeting routing based on enriched information. Layer it onto your current distribution logic. Book more meetings with your qualified buyers. Get started at revenuehero.io.
This episode is brought to you by Attribution.
Everyone says multi-touch attribution is dead, but it's not dead. It's just been done wrong. Most tools were built for another era or by people who don't actually run growth. They lean on Google Analytics or whatever the ad platforms tell you. Both are wrong. That's why your CAC looks off and your spend doesn't line up with revenue. The team behind attribution built growth data frameworks for companies like Dropbox, Replit, and CarGurus, feeding into the only MTA platform that delivers auditable revenue-grade accuracy across your entire funnel. It's trusted by over 1,000 B2B SaaS and e-commerce teams, and it's one of Twilio Segment's only two preferred partners for marketing auditability. Attribution connects to CRM, ad platforms, data warehouse, and e-commerce stack. With attribution, you can pinpoint CAC by channel, audit funnels across every source, and tie every ad, campaign, and piece of content to real ROI and retention. That's auditable growth from first visit to repeat purchase. Visit attributionapp.com/humans to finally see what's really driving your growth. One thing that we go back to that helps with some of these things, like not taking it too seriously, but also knowing your worth, is something that's a bit easier said than done as you're kind of growing in your career. And I wanted to chat about this bold career move that you made. Like you left an in-house job after just 9 months because it just wasn't the right fit for you. And
Hmm.
coming from the agency life where you were like the go-to expert for a bunch of different things, the switch to an in-house company kind of felt like just another cog in the machine and was kind of a tough pill to swallow, I'm sure.
Hmm.
At the time, you kind of saw the short stint as a failure, but in hindsight, it taught you to kind of recognize your value, even gave you like the courage to launch your own consulting gig. What advice do you give other mid-career ops folks or like later on in their career who feel undervalued or kind of stuck in a bad fit role? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of finding something that's better for you. If it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit. And I think it's okay to recognize that, whether, some people recognize that even a month after getting into a company. I recognized it pretty quickly at this role I went into, and I knew it wasn't going to be a forever thing. So it was almost like planning my exit strategy of like how I was going to approach that, because there's, responsibilities outside of just,
Right.
me. Like I have a kid. I have to like, make sure we are stable and things like that. And so, uh, honestly, I think like the recognizing your value, and if something is not a good fit, it's not worth staying in it for the mental strain as well, because the mental toll that takes on someone and the burnout creates such quick burnout if you're not happy in your role. Because at the end of the day, life's too short. You should find something that you enjoy doing. And I know people might roll their eyes and say, like, easier said than done, but I've found a role that I really love. And so I think it's, once you find what you're looking for, I think it's easier to kind of see, in hindsight, it was easier to find than you may have expected.
Yeah, great advice. I have like small number of mentors on the side that like throughout my career, like I've had a bunch of different mentors and I do this kind of for free. And I get this a lot, like people saying like, oh, like I always wonder if the grass is greener on the other side, but it takes so much time to update your resume and like fill out applications. And like I don't even think of it as like you need to take that step and update your resume and actually apply to jobs, but just the exercise of looking at what else is out there just helps when you feel down or stuck in your current role. Even in this like crazy job market that we're in right now, like there are other opportunities out there. And like our role is in demand. It's complex. Like there's a small subset percentage of people on this planet that can do what we do. And it's easy sometimes to like lose grasp of that, especially when you hear from people that, they were laid off and they can't find another job. I think that just the exercise of like thinking about like, all right, maybe I don't love what I'm doing right now. What does the upside look like? Like, what would I be really excited about? Like, what are some of the values that I'm missing in this current role? What do I don't like about my manager? Like, I think 9 out of 10 times you leave a job, it's usually because of the manager.
Mhm.
Like, and like thinking of things like, all right, if I was to change jobs, what would I ask this potential hiring manager to make sure that like I don't fall under this trap again? And like I've thought about this a lot also throughout the career, just like coming up with a list of things that are like must-haves in a new job. And like early on, even like pre-screen interview with the recruiter, like I asked some of these things. Like, do you guys like how flexible are you guys on asynchronous work? Like how many meetings are on the calendar? And if it's like a hard, like, oh yeah, we don't really know what async is, like hard pass for me, you know?
Right.
Like what are some of those questions for you to help you identify, is this gonna be a right fit for you?
Yeah, I worked with a professional coach a few years ago, and
Nice.
this was when I had been consulting for a while, but it was kind of like at this point where I was like, is this sustainable? And I was considering going in-house at that time. And she was working with me, and we made a list of non-negotiables. So those were like the list of things that I would not accept. For me as a parent, it's the flexibility to, like, be involved in my child's life and be at school events and, kind of leaning into that a bit more. So if there's no flexibility, I'm not going to likely take a role that doesn't offer that kind of flexibility. So I think it's really, like, thinking through what are your true, like, 4 to 5 non-negotiables for a role that would suit your lifestyle, and writing those down and then identifying companies that might be a good fit. And a lot of times you can actually find that in, how the company presents itself. I know Alma, I joined Alma as a contractor at first. So I was a contractor for 2 years before I joined full time. And I knew Alma was a mental health company, but, kind of I got the chance to kind of see how Alma worked before actually joining full time. But I know everything that Alma says that they are, on paper was true. And so I actually have found that to be very reflective of, how a company identifies themselves in job postings, for example. What their emphasis on, employees are, how they support their employees, what they're doing. So I think that's really important to kind of identify those non-negotiables and really figure out if a company's a good match. You can get a lot of insight too on Glassdoor for sure on different company.
Yeah, so true. Glassdoor is a gold mine sometimes. Like, I often would look at it too late in the interview process, and it's just like, oh man, why didn't I think of checking this out before? This like totally confirms some of my suspicions and the
Mhm.
yellow flags that I had in the interview process. Like now they're now officially red flags, and I'm probably
Right.
gonna pass on this now.
Right, yeah, so and I think too, just being aware of those yellow flags, like, if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right, and, like, really trusting your intuition with those kinds of things, no matter I mean, I think it kinda sucks sometimes with, like, looking for a job because you might be so desperate to get out of what
Right.
you're doing that you're like, "Oh, it's a yellow flag, I could probably deal with it." But you
Yeah.
should probably trust your intuition. You don't wanna hop from, like, one bad situation to another bad situation because that's just really gonna take a toll on
Hmm.
your mental health. So I think too, identifying those yellow flags as well and, listening to yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. I feel like we're, speaking from a bit of a place of privilege, but I love what you did, which was like you created your own, like you were working for yourself, you were doing your own like freelancing, and you found a company through contracting that you liked working with, and you kind of developed that. I feel like companies that do this well in the interview process is tricky. Like, so I had a short stint at WordPress Automatic, and they actually do this as part of the interview process. They call it like a trial period,
Hmm,
and it's super intensive. And they kind of tell you this up front, but they pay people for it. And it's not like a crazy fee or anything, but it's not like free labor. So they tell you like, I forget exactly if it's like 2 weeks or how long it is. I think it's 2 weeks. But for the course of 2 weeks, like you work in a real case scenario with the company and your hiring manager. They invite you into like their Slack org, and they're all asynchronous, so it's like around the clock. You have to do this on your personal time often, unless you like
mhm,
you're out of a job. But you basically get to like work with your hiring manager and a bunch of other people on the team, and you submit work, and people like give you feedback, and you can get a sense of other people on the team based on
mhm.
their feedback. And I don't know, it's like a trial that's like both ways. And I feel like you kind
Wow.
of got that with your consulting experience. You
Mm,
get to meet a bunch of those people, and like if you don't like it when you're consulting, like whatever, it's easy to kind of cut ties there. But I feel like it's so hard sometimes when you're doing this interview process, it's all about them asking you questions and not enough of the onus is on the person. Like it's a two-way street during the interviews. And sometimes like people forget that. And
Mhm.
you like it's yeah, sometimes easier said than done when you're like kind of like you said, like desperate to find a job there. But yeah, I liked your approach there, like doing consulting before you kind of go in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the questions part. I actually, when I'm interviewing someone, I like encourage them to ask questions
Yeah.
and I want them to come with questions. And a lot of times you'll find people don't really come with anything, which I always find surprising. And it's like, this is for you to interview the company as well and see if it's a good fit and really dig in on some of those questions. I did have one interview within the past 6 months. And the guy came with like some really like pressing questions. And I was like, this is impressive because he wants to know if we have the data infrastructure set up to really
Hmm.
support his role. And so I thought that was really interesting, and really impressive, like an interview process as well.
Yeah, in the best case scenario, you have a friend or a friend of a friend on the inside who can kind of like vet those answers because
Right.
even when you come with really good questions about the data infrastructure and like do people trust the experts that they hire, like
Yeah.
it's those people like want to hire the best people, so like they're not gonna oftentimes like I have had experiences where like someone was really candid sometimes and ended up like not moving forward, but like, they're selling the company too, right? So, like, if, like, you work at a company where, the founders, like, constantly tell you what to do and dismiss your mom's expertise and someone asks you, like, that question, does this happen at your company? Like, ugh, like, you're such a sellout, like, why are you even, like, hiring for this role if you're, like, openly admitting, like, "Yeah, we're working on this, but, it's a tough pill." But if you have a friend on the inside you can kind of say like, yo, like during the interview process, they said like they're this and that. Like, can you validate this? So yeah, easier said than done, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, connections are important.
Yeah. All right. Let's chat about like other like rituals to protect mental health that kind of come to mind here. Like there's maybe like some smaller things that safeguard mental health, whether it's like how you start your day, how you manage Slack or Teams, how you shut down at night. Like, do you have any personal rituals that keep you steady in like the chaos of marketing ops? How could others kind of experiment with similar practices? There anything come to mind?
Yeah, I every day during the work week, I start with like a 2 to 3 mile walk with my dogs. So I do that like as soon as I drop my son at school, I come home and walk the dogs and I'll listen to a podcast or whatever as I'm walking to kind of just make sure I'm like in a good headspace. Usually it's not marketing ops related because I don't want anything associated with work before I'm actually working.
Yeah, don't
Uh,
blame you.
yeah, and then Slack is I've actually, I think having the consulting experience that I've had, I've been able to manage like a very healthy work-life balance. So when I was a consultant, I worked certain hours and then I was cut for the day. Like I didn't check email or anything like that. And so that kind of has transferred into my professional life. I do have Slack on my phone. Sometimes I'll take it off if I'm like feeling the mental stress. But it's usually like at a certain point in the day, I'm not checking after a certain point. Or if I do see a message, I don't have notifications coming through. So I have to actually like physically go check it myself. But if I do see a message, I make a choice to not answer it until the next day because sometimes too, I think if you see a message coming after hours, it might get you like a little heated based off of the context. So I think giving yourself that time to kind of, fizzle out a little bit and think how you're going to respond. I think that's super helpful to come back fresh the next day. So I think being a parent helps in this like work-life balance because you have to cut it off at a certain point, especially with my son being 9, like, he'll straight up say, "Mom, why are you on your phone?"
Calling you out.
Yeah, so that's been, like, really eye-opening recently, so I think I'm way more cognizant of, like, making sure I'm not on my phone when it's family time at the end of the day.
Yeah, this is such an area that I need to work on. Like, I'm listening to your answer, and I'm like, my daughter's not old enough to call me out, but like she would call me out like multiple times if she did. And I feel like I don't know if it was easier when I was in house, but when I was in house, like tons of responsibilities, but like the company paid me for working a certain amount of hours, right?
Right.
And like at a certain time, like you said, I clock out, whether you like consult or whatever. But then, when you work for yourself, there's all these other things like potential prospects and sales conversations and accounting. And so,
Mhm.
other than the work, like there's tons of other things going on. And yeah,
Right.
I'm like making excuses for it there, but I
Yeah.
think that's great advice. Like when you open your phone, knowing that there could be a message in Slack there that could derail the rest of your evening. Like when you
Mhm.
send out, especially like when you're about to clock out, you send out this proposal or this thing that you were supposed to do, and you're expecting someone to write back. And you're just like, oh, do I take the next like 20 minutes reading that response now in the evening and it potentially like ruining the rest of my
Right.
night? Or like, do I just like close that off? Like I can open it tomorrow. Like that's a mindful decision that you make, and I love that you don't have notifications on. That's awesome.
Yeah, I only have notifications for text messages and phone calls. I don't like notifications. It's a way to, like, not be connected to my phone. I don't have any social media on my phone anymore. I made, like, a cognizant choice. So I think those are, like, little, like, personal things that I've done to kind of help maintain that balance as well. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's hard, especially in like, an ops role because you have a lot of plates that you're trying to juggle at one time. And a lot of people are demanding things of you, but I make it very like, my calendar is very, like, do not block, do not book this time,
Yeah.
like, do so I'm really good about that as well. And I also like contributing to my no person personality. I say no to meetings a lot. So if I
Nice.
don't feel like if I have a lot going on and I do not have the mental bandwidth for another meeting, like I will say no without I don't give context either. I'm just like, I can't make this meeting. Like that should be enough. If you really need me, like you can reach out to me on Slack. So I feel like async, you have to figure out how to work async, especially in like a remote world that we're in today too.
Yeah, I love that. Saying no to meetings without even giving context, like, especially when there's no agenda on the meetings. I had an
Mhm.
old coworker that was just like, "No agenda, no attenda for me. Sorry, friend."
No.
Like, not even a message in Slack, like, just no context. Here's a meeting invite for an hour on a Tuesday, like, over a do
Yeah.
not book time. Sorry, man. I would oftentimes just have, like, in Google Calendar, like, auto decline in, like, my do not block times, and
Same.
people would just be like, "Hey, I just got an auto decline for this." Yeah, it's like, "Yeah, I don't take meetings on Tuesdays, like, deal with it."
Yeah. And I think too, sometimes, I push back. Someone wants to have a meeting to talk about one email. And I'm like, you should be able to explain this to me
Yeah,
in a ticket. Like I shouldn't if you should be able to explain with enough detail, and then if I have questions, I can come to you and ask or
yeah.
clarify in the Asana ticket. We don't need to have a meeting about an email.
I love
So
that. That's kind of the art of async, right? Like it's oftentimes people just default to a synchronous meeting because they haven't formulated this idea in their head yet. And they're just looking to speak out loud to
mhm.
someone and get minor validation. But really, they're just like getting like to speak out loud. And they could have
Yes.
just done that on their own, formulated their thoughts a bit better, written it down succinctly, and
Mhm.
then you send it off to that person and they can answer on their own time when they have time, when they're out of like deep focus mode. That's the thing
Right.
with like synchronous, like it's all about the requester. Like when you send a message and it's like, hey, do you have 5 minutes to chat right now? Like you're asking this person to stop what they're doing. And it's just like, it's not cool.
No, it's not cool. That's why I love tools like Loom. So
Hmm.
Loom gives people I mean, it helps asynchronous work so much. So you can go through something, ask questions on the video, and then
Yeah.
send it to someone, and then you can interact with them on the Loom as well. So I love using tools like that to kinda go back and forth. And if something is, like, really pressing, where, like, we're just not getting it through these tools, like, there gets to a point where you might have to have, like, a short 5-minute conversation, but it doesn't need to be a 30-minute meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Let's chat about shiny object syndrome. Like
Mm.
in Martech and ops, there's always something shiny, new that people are chasing. Especially in the age of AI these days, like there's a hot strategy or new tool, and everyone on LinkedIn can't stop talking about it. FOMO is really real in marketing ops and Martech, and I feel like you've seen the waves come and go. Like one quarter, everyone's really hot on like PLG or agentic
Hmm.
AI or this or like MCP and the magic bullet, right? And the next quarter, it's kind of something else. We all remember things like frenzying out and fizzling out. How do you keep your head on straight amid like all the buzz and the chatter in our echo chamber with when it comes to like Martech? Do you have like a personal filter for separating like what's actually valuable versus just hype? And like how can ops team kind of avoid chasing every trend instead of just like staying focused on what actually moves the needle for the business?
Yeah, I think tools are funny in space because people become almost like cult-like around certain tools. So I
Yeah,
remember you probably remember the drift craze back in
yeah,
the
for
day.
sure.
Like it was like everyone was getting this drift certification and everyone was getting this tool and having these chatbots added onto their website. And then like you implement one time and you're like, I never want to do this ever again. But then you see like things that happened recently with drift, where it just spontaneously combusted apparently and poof is gone because of some security issue after getting bought. So it's I try not to put my all my eggs in one basket for one specific tool. Do I have my preferences for marketing automation platforms? Yes, I do, but that doesn't mean I'm not open to the idea of other ones. So when I'm thinking of tooling, especially, like, I'm thinking of a business case behind why we need a specific tool, so and what's it going to help, so, for example, Knack is a good tool, that we are actually about to implement, which is really exciting, and one thing that Knack does well is it's gonna remove a lot of process friction between creative and MOPS and the stakeholder that's requesting whatever email. So that's how I'm kind of approaching different tools like that and like how it can actually help us remove process friction and also increase efficiency. So I don't really get like attached to certain tools as much. I like seeing the chatter, on LinkedIn, Clay is another one that everyone's like obsessing about. And so it's just funny to kind of like observe and see what people say, and then kind of just make your own decisions based off of the business case of what your company needs.
Yeah, such a great answer. I used to like when I was in house, like back in like drift was still like really popular at the time, I guess. But like one of the questions that the CMO that was hiring with me would ask interview candidates is like, "Oh, what's like a Martech company that is doing really well right now that you like you love their brand
Mhm.
building or whatever?" And I would always add at the end of that, "But you can't say drift," because like everyone would just default to drift. Like, "Oh, I love what
Mhm.
drift is doing." And no shade to Dave Gerhardt. Like I think he's building something cool at Exit 5 now, and
Mhm.
he did his time at Drift. But yeah, it's so true. Like Clay is definitely in that same mold now as well.
Mhm.
Lovable. There's all these like AI apps also. So yeah, it's a weird time to be in Martech, and I feel like it's getting harder and harder to disassociate with like what is vaporware versus like hype. Like knowing all these tools, it's so easy to like have a GPT wrapper on top of your product. And it's like, oh, we have this like new AI feature, but we really just implemented an MCP server and we're like on top of not even GPT-5, it's like GPT 4.5 here.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I appreciate the knack shout out there,
Yes.
unprompted sponsor of the show. Appreciate that. I want to ask you a couple more questions, Anna. So this idea, we kind of teased this out already, but like, I'm a big fan of thinking about quiet stress versus visible stress. I feel like people that are in like marketing, campaign manager roles, or like sales teams, even like people that are on the front lines of doing things, like they get a ton of recognition when they get big wins or the company is doing well. Like the KPIs that they have are all very visible. The whole company kind of sees it. But marketing ops teams stress usually stays invisible. Like when sales are down and like campaign metrics are down, like everyone sees it. But like marketing ops, when things are super stressful, like there's tons of projects and there's like milestone lag, like no one really sees that. It's not like a corporate KPI that's tracked on like the all company dashboard. How can marketing ops pros make the invisible stress of their work visible in a way that leads to more support instead of, just making it feel like there's complaints?
Yeah, I think proactively, I'm trying to think of a good way to say this, like proactively letting your team know kind of what your team is working on. So we do this in Asana. So we have, like a portfolio of everything we're working on. So it's easy for people to see and get updates when we update a project. So I think we've done a really good job at Alma to kind of make that visibility known of everything that marketing ops is working on, and also our separate board of like the BAU type work that comes through, with like the day-to-day tickets, things that are outside of like the bigger projects that we're working on. So we have like visibility to say, this is everything that we're working on currently. And, providing proactive updates to team members as well to kind of make that, a little bit more known in terms of like what marketing ops is truly working on. Cause you have your hand in a lot of different pots in marketing ops cross functionally as well. So you're not only like a marketing resource, but you're a cross-functional resource. You work closely with data engineering, you work closely with BI. So it's coming up with a way to kind of educate, your team, especially in marketing, to kind of see like everything that your team is helping with and kind of move the needle forward on. I think just being proactive, making that more visible, I think is helpful so people have context of why you don't have bandwidth to take anything else on.
Yeah, great answer. I feel like ops leaders often think their job is to protect systems, but protecting people is probably just as important. Humans of Martech. But how do you intentionally weave this idea of like mental health awareness into your leadership style, like mental health as a leadership skill? And what can marketing ops managers or team leaders do to normalize conversations about stress, workload on their teams? Like oftentimes, if you're complaining about certain things, like, oh, you're going to be branded as like a complainer or someone that doesn't have good work ethic. Like, how do you like normalize discussions about mental health?
Yeah. With my team members, what I'm usually doing when in our one-on-ones to start is just like a check-in to say, "Hey, how are things going? Is there anything, you know, might be causing more stress or blocking you from being able to proceed on other things?" I do think there's a balance though, and I read an article recently about you don't want to become your team member's therapist as their manager. So it's like balancing, like making sure that your team member is not stressed and unblocking them where you can, but also making sure that they have ways to advocate for themselves and their team so that they can build that, more strategic cross-functional relationship as well. So I think there's like a balance there too of, wanting to support your team members and making sure you can be that person that can help unblock them as their leader, but also giving them the tools in their toolbox to also, advocate for themselves and their work as well. I think that's important too.
And I got one last question for you. We ask this to everyone that comes on the podcast. Oftentimes, we'll have like a big discussion about like marketing strategy or marketing ops or whatever. And then this is the only like human kind of question. But we've kind of talked about the human side of things in the whole episode here. And so this is maybe like a summary of some of the stuff that you've chatted about here. But you're director of marketing ops at a really cool mental health company. You're obviously a team leader, but at home, you're also a mother of a 9-year-old. You're a sports mom, you're a tennis fanatic as well. One question we ask everyone on the show is, how do you remain happy and successful in your career? And how do you find balance between all the things you're working on while staying happy and caring about your mental health?
Yeah. Oh, this is a great one. I think, all of those things that I have going on outside of work, being a mom kind of helps with the balance between work and life. But then also making sure that I'm not burning myself out too much. So being able to recognize when I'm feeling, a little bit too much, proactively taking time off. I think that's one thing that consulting helps me
Mhm.
figure out is like the balance of like taking time off. And I'm really good about taking time off now and prioritizing, family time as well. So I think just recognizing when I'm starting to feel stressed. I also, I'm not shy to address it with my manager directly. So I think it's important to call it out and say, "Hey, I'm feeling the weight of everything." Your team might be going through like drastic changes. Sometimes there are like team consolidations, there's new tech that you're absorbing, or new tech that you're implementing, and it can just build on after time. And so I think recognizing that and calling it out is important, and also helps you build like that human relationship as well with your manager, because at the end of the day, we are all humans, and it's important to recognize that we do need some time away from work because we can't burn us out in the end.
Great answer. Everyone you work with is a human, at least for now, for the short term.
Yeah.
TBD on that. And it's just super fun. I really appreciate your time. For folks in the U.S., yeah, we'll put links to Alma. I think it's a super cool resource. I'm based in Canada, and would have loved to work at a company that gave me access to services like that. Encourage folks to take mental health seriously in their jobs. Like, it's a super high stress job, especially if you're in like startup or scale up and you're nowhere close to profitability, and marketing ops isn't like the team that's being associated with like growth and numbers and ROI. So it's a tough gig out there. And I think something we didn't touch on too much is like this idea of community. And I think like some of the strategies that you brought forth here were really valuable for folks in our community. So thanks for taking a bit of time during crazy planning. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun to chat.